Sometimes when you're working with really large formats like billboards or posters or banners, it's a good idea to work to scale. One, because it saves your computer processing power. It keeps your computer from overheating or shutting down. If you have a really large artboard with a lot of complicated kinds of imagery in it, then your laptop won't like it or your computer may not like it. And so that's the first reason. The second reason is because working to scale is more manageable for you, the designer, to be able to pick comfortable ranges of things like type sizes or object scaling, like dragging up and down, resizing images and photography, things like that. It's also important to note that if you do work to scale, you may want to double check to make sure your file is a high resolution. 300 dpi is ideal, 600 dpi is overkill. And so just try and keep those numbers in mind when you're doing the file new document, following that prompt to select high resolution. So now that you know the reasons of why we work to scale, how do you work to scale? For this example, it's a 48-foot by 14-foot billboard. Let's imagine that this is those dimensions. You can convert the feet to inches, but then you still have a pretty large artboard, 48 inches by 14 inches, which is relatively large, still too big to want to work with that. You can take those new numbers, 48 inches by 14 inches, and divide it by 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or 6, whatever you want to do. Note that the larger the number is that you're dividing those original dimensions by, the smaller the size of your canvas or artboard or project is going to be. So if we take the 14 foot, which we've now converted into inches, 14 inches and divided it by 2, you see that it comes out to 7 inches. And 48 inches, which was 48 feet, divided by 2 now comes to 24. That's a manageable size. But if we divide it by 3, we get a decimal point, which is not a problem here in a new document dialog, but 4.667 by 16, which is even more comfortable for us. So I'd say work within a range that you feel the most comfortable in. If 24 inches is not too wide for you, then dividing those numbers by 2 is probably the best way to go. But if you need something a little bit smaller, then dividing them by 3 is probably ideal. When you get into half an inch by 15 inches, I'd say I don't know if that's the real ratio, but that's probably not ideal to have a half an inch file in height. So be reasonable and kind of use a little bit of rational, logic when you're trying to create this kind of small to scale workspace for a design that is possibly much larger than that. Another good thing to know is ratios. So there are some common ratios that we use in design and in art. And you think about when you get something framed, like a picture, you have choices of, 18 by 24, 8 by 10, or maybe it's 12 by 12. The ratios are what you're looking at. And ratio just basically describes the relationship between an object's width and height. Ratios are typically written as fractions. So this would be a ratio of 3 to 4. Okay, so the length is 4 on this side and 3 on this side. This square, in addition to that, is also 3 to 4. These are still in the same ratio because they're relatively the same kind of rectangle. You'll notice that a ratio of a square is 1 to 1. One side equals one side all the way around. So you can have a square that's 10 by 10 in a 1-to-1 ratio and a square that's 4 by 4 in a 1-to-1 ratio because the width and the height are relatively the same. Ratios you multiply by. So you take that ratio 3 to 4 and multiply it by 2. 2 times 3 is 6, 2 times 4 is 8, 6 by 8 would be double that size, triple that size, 9 by 12. 5 times that size, 15 by 20, 6 times that size, 18 by 24. And guess what? 18 by 24 is that aspect ratio of 3 to 4. and 24 by 32. So you can kind of see that if you're working in a ratio, a smaller kind of fraction number that describes the relationship of the width to the height of a document or an object, then you can kind of extrapolate or work to scale down from that pretty easily. So instead of making a file for a poster that's 18 by 24, you can now make a file 9 by 12 and 300 dpi that will easily size up to 18 by 24 without a huge loss of quality. So again, you use working to scale to kind of save processing power, computer memory, save your laptop from just completely, overheating. But you also work in to scale to help you kind of get a sense of the space that you're working in. Again, the ease in which you choose type sizes, you can scale objects, that kind of thing, use photography, all of that goes into wanting to work to scale. Again, if you have questions, just reach out.